Irkutsk, he will betray the town, and with it my brother, whose life he seeks. This is what I have learned from my secret intelligence. This is what the Grand Duke does not know, and this is what he must know." "Well, sire, an intelligent, courageous courier—" "I momentarily expect one." "And it is to be hoped he will be expeditious," added the chief of police; "for, allow me to add, sire, that Siberia is a favorable land for rebellions." "Do you mean to say, General, that the exiles would make common cause with the rebels?" exclaimed the Czar. "Excuse me, your majesty," stammered the chief of police, for that was really the idea suggested to him by his uneasy and suspicious mind. "I believe in their patriotism," returned the Czar. "There are other offenders besides political exiles in Siberia," said the chief of police. "The criminals? Oh, General, I give those up to you. They are the vilest, I grant, of the human race. They belong to no country. But the insurrection, or rather the rebellion, is not to oppose the emperor. It is raised against Russia, against the country which the exiles have not lost all hope of again seeing, and which they will see again. No, a Russian would never unite with a Tartar, to weaken, were it only for an hour, the Muscovite power." The Czar was right in trusting to the patriotism of those whom his policy kept, for a time, at a distance. Clemency, which was the foundation of his justice, when he could himself direct its effects, the modifications he had adopted with regard to applications for the formerly terrible ukases, warranted the belief that he was not mistaken. But even without this powerful element of success in regard to the Tartar rebellion, circumstances were not the less very serious, for it was to be feared that a large part of the Kirghiz population would join the rebels. The Kirghiz are divided into three hordes, the greater, the lesser, and the middle, and number nearly 400,000 tents, or 2,000,000 souls. Of the different tribes, some are independent and others recognize either the sovereignty of Russia or that of the Khans of Khiva, Khokhand, and Bokhara, the most formidable chiefs of Turkestan. The middle horde, the richest, is also the largest, and its encampments occupy all the space between the rivers Sarasu, Irtish, and the Upper Ishim, Lake Saisang, and Lake Aksakal. The greater horde, occupying the countries situated to the east of the middle one, extends as far as the governments of Omsk and Tobolsk. Therefore, if the Kirghiz population should rise, it would be the rebellion of Asiatic Russia, and the first thing would be the separation of Siberia, to the east of the Yenisei. It is true that these Kirghiz, mere novices in the art of war, are rather nocturnal thieves and plunderers of caravans than regular soldiers. As M. Levchin says, "A firm front or a square of good infantry could repel 10 times the number of Kirghiz, and a single cannon might destroy a frightful number." That may be, but to do this it is necessary for the square of good infantry to reach the rebellious country, and the cannon to leave the arsenals of the Russian provinces, perhaps 2 or 3,000 versts distant. Now, except by the direct route from Ekaterenburg to Irkutsk, the often marshy steppes are not easily practicable, and some weeks must certainly pass before the Russian troops could reach the Tartar hordes. Omsk is the center of that military organization of Western Siberia which is intended to overawe the Kirghiz population. Here are the bounds, more than once infringed by the half subdued nomads, and there was every reason to believe that Omsk was already in danger. The line of military stations, that is to say, those Cossack posts which are ranged in echelon from Omsk to Semipolatinsk, must have been broken in several places. Now, it was to be feared that the Grand Sultans, who govern the Kirghiz districts, would either voluntarily accept, or involuntarily submit to, the dominion of Tartars, Mussulmen like themselves, and that to the hate caused by slavery was not united the hate due to the antagonism of the Greek and Mussulman religions. For some time indeed, the Tartars of Turkestan had endeavored, both by force and persuasion, to subdue the Kirghiz hordes. A few words only with respect to these Tartars. The Tartars belong more especially to two distinct races, the Caucasian and the Mongolian. The Caucasian race, which, as Abel de Remusat says, is regarded in Europe as the type of beauty in our species, because all the nations in this part of the world have sprung from it, includes also the Turks and the Persians. The purely Mongolian race comprises the Mongols, Manchu, and Tibetans. The Tartars, who now threatened the Russian Empire, belonged to the Caucasian race, and occupied Turkestan. This immense country is divided into different states, governed by khans, and hence termed khanates. The principal khanates are those of Bokhara, Kokand, Kunduz, etc. At this period the most important and the most formidable khanate was that of Bokhara. Russia had already been several times at war with its chiefs, who, for their own interests, had supported the independence of the Kirghiz against the Muscovite dominion. The present chief, Feofar Khan, followed in the steps of his predecessors. The Khanate of Bokhara has a population of 2,500,000 inhabitants, an army of 60,000 men trebled in time of war, and 30,000 horsemen. It is a rich country, with varied animal, vegetable, and mineral products, and has been increased by the accession of the territories of Balkh, Okhoi, and Meimane. It possesses 19 large towns. Bokhara, surrounded by a wall measuring more than 8 English miles, and flanked with towers, a glorious city, made illustrious by Avicenna and other learned men of the 10th century, is regarded as the center of Mussulman science, and ranks among the most celebrated cities of Central Asia. Samarcand, which contains the tomb of Tamerlane and the famous palace where the blue stone is kept on which each new Khan must seat himself on his accession, is defended by a very strong citadel. Karshi, with its triple cordon, situated in an oasis, surrounded by a marsh peopled with tortoises and lizards, is almost impregnable. Ischarjwi is defended by a population of 20,000 souls. Protected by its mountains, and isolated by its steppes, the Khanate of Bokhara is a most formidable state, and Russia would need a large force to subdue it. The fierce and ambitious Feofar now governed this corner of Tartary. Relying on the other Khans, principally those of Kokand and Kunduz, cruel and rapacious warriors, all ready to join an enterprise so dear to Tartar instincts, aided by the chiefs who ruled all the hordes of Central Asia, he had placed himself at the head of the rebellion of which Ivan Ogareff was the instigator. This traitor, impelled by insane ambition as much as by hate, had ordered the movement so as to attack Siberia. Mad indeed he was if he hoped to rupture the Muscovite Empire. Acting under his suggestion, the Emir, which is the title taken by the Khans of Bokhara, had poured his hordes over the Russian frontier. He invaded the government of Semipolatinsk, and the Cossacks, who were only in small force there, had been obliged to retire before him. He had advanced farther than Lake Balkhash, gaining over the Kirghiz population on his way. Pillaging, ravaging, enrolling those who submitted, taking prisoners those who resisted, he marched from one town to another, followed by those impedimenta of Oriental sovereignty which may be called his household, his wives and his slaves, all with the cool audacity of a modern Genghis Khan. It was impossible to ascertain where he now was, how far his soldiers had marched before the news of the rebellion reached Moscow, or to what part of Siberia the Russian troops had been forced to retire. All communication was interrupted. Had the wire between Kolyvan and Tomsk been cut by Tartar scouts, or had the Emir himself arrived at the Yeniseisk provinces? Was all the lower part of western Siberia in a ferment? Had the rebellion already spread to the eastern regions? No one could say. The only agent which fears neither cold nor heat, which can neither be stopped by the rigors of winter nor the heat of summer, and which flies with the rapidity of lightning, the electric current, was prevented from traversing the steppes. And it was no longer possible to warn the Grand Duke, shut up in Irkutsk, of the danger threatening him from the treason of Ivan Ogareff. A courier only could supply the place of the interrupted current. It would take this man some time to traverse the 5,200 versts between Moscow and Irkutsk. To pass the ranks of the rebels and invaders he must display almost superhuman courage and intelligence. But with a clear head and a firm heart much can be done. Shall I be able